Welcome to Psychology for People in a Hurry. Today, we're unpacking one of the most perplexing, mind-bending true stories ever documented, The Minds of Billy Milligan. This isn't just a book, it's a journey into the deepest corners of the human mind, where reality blurs with the unimaginable. We're talking about dissociative identity disorder, a condition so rare and mysterious that even experts can't fully agree on its causes or treatment. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about the human psyche. Now, dissociative identity disorder isn't new to pop culture. You've seen its shadows in films like Identity, Shutter Island, and Fight Club. But here's the twist. All those stories trace back to one groundbreaking case, the story of Billy Milligan. And that's what we're diving into today. Let's start with the man behind the book, Daniel Keyes. If his name sounds familiar, it should. He's the literary genius who gave us Flowers for Algernon, a book that hits you right in the soul and lingers for decades. With The Minds of Billy Milligan, Keyes took his knack for exploring human complexity to the next level. This isn't just storytelling, it's a mix of investigative journalism, psychological exploration, and deep empathy. Keyes didn't just write a book, he unraveled a mystery. Here's the setup. In October 1977, a series of crimes rocked Ohio, 3 rapes in just 2 weeks. The suspect? A young man named Billy Milligan. But when Billy was arrested, the case flipped on its head. During interrogation, psychologists discovered something extraordinary. Billy wasn't just Billy. He was 24 different people. Yes, you heard that right. 24 personalities, each with its own identity. There was Arthur, a British intellectual. Reagan, a Yugoslavian communist. Adalana, a shy 19-year-old girl. These weren't quirks or eccentricities. They were fully formed identities, each with its own voice, mannerisms, and even physical traits. And here's the kicker. This revelation made Billy the first person in U.S. history to be acquitted of serious crimes due to dissociative identity disorder. Let's pause for a second, because I know what you're thinking. Was Billy faking it? Was this some elaborate con to avoid punishment? If so, how could anyone convincingly switch between 24 distinct personalities under scrutiny? And if he wasn't, what kind of trauma could shatter a mind so completely? These are the questions Daniel Keyes set out to answer. Keyes didn't take the easy route. He interviewed Billy for hundreds of hours, spoke with dozens of people who knew him, and pored over therapy tapes to get the full picture. The deeper he dug, the stranger the story became. And here's the thing. No matter how outlandish it sounds, the evidence pointed to one undeniable truth. Billy's condition wasn't just psychological. It was a survival mechanism forged by unimaginable trauma. If this story already has you hooked, here's a pro tip. Check out Netflix's Monsters Inside, The 24 Faces of Billy Milligan. It's a gripping deep dive into the case that pairs perfectly with Keyes' book. So, here's how we're breaking this down. First, we'll tackle the big question. Was Billy a master manipulator or a genuine victim of a fractured mind? We'll explore how these 24 personalities came to exist and why they were so convincing. Then, we'll zoom out and look at the science, what dissociative identity disorder is, how it works, and what it reveals about the brain's capacity to cope with trauma. Finally, we'll follow Billy's life after the trial, what happened once the courtrooms cleared and the media frenzy faded. Let's rewind to October 1977, when fear gripped Ohio State University. In just 2 weeks, 3 rapes sent shockwaves through the campus, prompting panic and leading the university to arrange safe accompaniment for female students. Amid the chaos, the police zeroed in on a suspect, Billy Milligan. With fingerprints, victim identifications, and belongings from the crime scenes, it seemed like an open and shut case. But when police arrested Billy at his home, something felt off. He seemed terrified, confused, repeatedly asking what was happening and whether he'd hurt anyone. His reaction left the officers uneasy, and the strangeness only deepened at the station. There, Billy's behavior shifted dramatically. He curled into a corner, sobbing uncontrollably, then passed out. When he woke, he sat dazed until he noticed a bug crawling nearby. He laughed like a child. Hours later, as Billy was transported to jail, the prosecutor overseeing the case remarked almost jokingly, "The only defense left would be to claim he's mentally ill." That offhand comment sparked an idea. Billy's defense attorney, noticing his erratic behavior, requested a psychiatric evaluation. The court agreed, assigning psychologist Dorothy Turner to assess Billy's mental state. During her first session, Turner encountered something extraordinary. Billy insisted he wasn't Billy. He introduced himself as David, an 8-year-old who explained that the real Billy was asleep. David claimed he only emerged when someone was in pain, following the orders of someone named Arthur. When pressed about Arthur, David fell silent, leaving Turner skeptical yet intrigued. The next day, Billy became Christopher, a 13-year-old with a British accent who loved playing harmonica. A day later, Tom appeared, a 16-year-old escape artist who bragged about his skill with restraints and his love of painting. By her 4th visit, Turner had met Aaron, a talkative 18-year-old, and finally Arthur, the calculated, intellectual leader of Billy's inner world. Arthur explained the system. Within Billy's mind was a metaphorical white spotlight, and whoever stepped into it took control of his body. Turner realized this was no ordinary case. The personalities were distinct and fully formed, convincing even a seasoned skeptic. Turner brought her findings to Billy's defense attorney, who doubted the claim but agreed to visit him in jail. There, the lawyer witnessed Billy seamlessly transition between David, the pain-bearer, Danny, a shy 14-year-old terrified of strangers, and Reagan, a dominant, aggressive 23-year-old with a Slavic accent. Reagan, Arthur's counterpart, revealed his role as protector. He claimed responsibility for dangerous situations but denied committing the rapes, explaining his actions as efforts to shield Billy from harm. The lawyer was stunned. 2 experts, Dr. Cornelia and Dr. Harding, were brought in to verify the diagnosis. They met multiple personalities, including the core Billy himself. When Billy emerged, trembling and confused, he asked, "Am I still alive? What did I do wrong this time?" The moment left even the experts shaken. As treatment progressed, the puzzle of Billy's fractured psyche began to take shape. Using recordings, Dr. Harding helped Billy understand his other identities. The breakthrough came when Adalana, a poetic, soft-spoken 19-year-old, confessed to the rapes. She explained her actions as driven by a longing for love and care, though she insisted she never meant to harm anyone. To uncover why Billy's mind had shattered, Dr. Harding delved into his past. Billy's father had committed suicide when Billy was 4, leaving his mother emotionally distant. Her new husband, Billy's stepfather, was abusive, subjecting Billy to horrific acts, including burying him alive with only a tube for air, into which he urinated. These traumas fractured Billy's mind, creating personalities to protect him. Adalana emerged later, drawn to traditionally feminine tasks like cooking and writing poetry, which Billy's stepfather mocked as cowardly. Over time, her hatred for men and yearning for comfort grew, driving her actions. By age 16, Billy hit a breaking point, attempting suicide by walking onto a school rooftop. Reagan and Arthur intervened, vowing to protect Billy by keeping the core personality dormant. For 7 years, they managed his life, ensuring survival while shielding him from further harm. After months of treatment, Dr. Harding declared Billy competent for trial, but concluded his dissociative identity disorder rendered him not culpable for the crimes. The court agreed, acquitting him by reason of insanity, a landmark decision in U.S. legal history. Let's take a moment to zoom out and ask a fundamental question. What exactly is dissociative identity disorder? If the term multiple personality disorder sounds more familiar, you're not alone. But let's be clear, this is one of the most controversial and enigmatic conditions in psychology where science, skepticism, and intrigue collide. At its core, dissociative identity disorder is defined by the presence of 2 or more distinct identities, what we call alters, existing within a single individual. Each identity has its own personality, age, gender, voice, and even physical traits. Think about that for a second. The same body, yet completely different people. Studies show that nearly 37% of dissociative identity disorder patients experience shifts in dominant hand use, heart rate, blood pressure, eyesight, and even IQ, depending on which alter is in control. It's as if the body itself rewires every time a new personality steps forward. You might be wondering, how do these identities coexist? Don't they conflict? The answer is yes, and the conflicts can be intense. People with dissociative identity disorder often describe their mind as a stage, with multiple performers battling for the spotlight. Alters argue, interrupt, and sometimes sabotage one another, creating chaos in what feels like a constant struggle for control. But here's something to consider. We all experience shifts in behavior. You might act one way at work, another with friends, and completely different at home. The key difference for someone with dissociative identity disorder is that these shifts aren't voluntary. They're involuntary and triggered by external stimuli. In Billy Milligan's case, danger would summon Reagan, the protector, while pain would bring forward David, the bearer of suffering. These transitions often result in memory gaps, leaving the individual with no recollection of what happened while another identity was in control. Now, imagine waking up in an unfamiliar place with no memory of how you got there. For people with dissociative identity disorder, this isn't an occasional occurrence. It's their everyday reality. A study of 100 dissociative identity disorder patients found that 98 reported complete memory disconnection between identities. It's like flipping between TV channels, with no way to know what happened on the previous show. Because dissociative identity disorder is so rare and its symptoms so dramatic, skepticism has surrounded it for decades. People often ask, is it even real? Could someone fake this? That's where science steps in. Physiological studies have shown that dissociative identity disorder isn't just psychological, it has physical markers. When alters switch, changes occur in skin conductance, brainwave activity, and even neurological responses. In 1978, Billy Milligan underwent brainwave tests that revealed something astonishing. His EEG showed delta waves in the right posterior region, patterns typically seen in children. This provided hard evidence that the personality being tested wasn't adult Billy, but one of his child alters. It wasn't just his behavior that changed, his brain physically reflected the shift. So, what causes a mind to fracture like this? While there's no single answer, the overwhelming consensus is childhood trauma. Severe neglect, physical abuse, and especially sexual abuse are common threads. In one study of 135 dissociative identity disorder patients, 92% reported experiencing sexual abuse, often by parents or close family members. Billy's story is a textbook example. His stepfather's abuse, it was psychological warfare. From burying Billy alive to violating and tormenting him, the trauma was so profound that his mind created separate identities to cope. For children in these situations, there's no escape. They can't fight back and they can't run away. So their minds do the next best thing. They disconnect. They sever the link between their emotions and reality, assigning each identity a role to bear the burden. One alter absorbs fear, another handles anger, and yet another shields the core self from pain entirely. As Billy's story puts it, when sorrow becomes too much for one person to bear, I divide this suffering across many. But dissociative identity disorder isn't the only outcome of trauma. It often comes with a cascade of other mental health challenges. Studies show that 97% of dissociative identity disorder patients also suffer from depression. Around 90% struggle with anxiety disorders, 65% face substance abuse issues, and many deal with eating disorders. The ripple effect of trauma extends far beyond the initial pain. This brings us to a sobering reality. Childhood abuse isn't as rare as we'd like to think. Every year, an estimated 1 billion children worldwide experience some form of violence, physical, emotional, or sexual. Often, this abuse comes from the very people meant to protect them, parents. For these children, the scars, both physical and emotional, last a lifetime, affecting their mental health, relationships, and, in some cases, perpetuating the cycle of violence. Dissociative identity disorder may be one of the most extreme outcomes of trauma, but it forces us to confront difficult truths about abuse, survival, and the incredible resilience of the human mind. It's a condition that challenges us to rethink how we understand identity, memory, and the lengths the mind will go to protect itself. Let's revisit Billy Milligan's story, picking up after his groundbreaking trial and historic acquittal. Imagine this, walking out of a courtroom, not to cheers of understanding, but to a tidal wave of skepticism, fear, and judgment. That was Billy's reality. In his own words, he hoped to live as an ordinary person and rediscover the meaning of life. But for Billy, ordinary was a dream that could never come true. Following the trial, Billy wasn't set free in the way most would imagine. Instead, he was sent to a mental health center, a far cry from prison's harsh realities. This new facility offered him a supportive environment, a chance to rebuild. Under the care of Dr. David Call, a dedicated therapist, Billy began the next chapter of his life. Here, he found books to read, spaces to exercise, and, perhaps most importantly, the freedom to express himself through art. For Billy, art was more than a hobby, it was survival. His paintings became windows to his fractured soul. He even began selling his work, using the proceeds to make a statement. He opened an account under the name Prevent Child Abuse Foundation and shared flyers with a poignant message: "Today, hug your children." It's a small act that can stop child abuse. It was a moment of hope, a glimpse of a man trying to turn his pain into something meaningful. But Billy's journey was far from straightforward. As therapy continued, Dr. Call uncovered a startling discovery. Beyond the 10 personalities initially identified, there were 13 more, hidden away, suppressed by Arthur, the overseer. And then came an extraordinary breakthrough. A new personality emerged, the teacher. This wasn't just another alter, it was a unified version of Billy himself. For the first time, all 24 personalities were fully recognized, and the dream of healing seemed closer than ever. As Billy's progress continued, restrictions on his life began to ease. He was granted supervised trips outside the facility, and eventually, he was allowed to go out on his own. But with freedom came a crushing backlash. The media caught wind of these outings, and the headlines were merciless. Rapist Billy granted freedom to roam screamed across newspapers, igniting a firestorm of fear and outrage. Public pressure mounted, demanding new laws and guarantees of safety. For Billy, the relentless scrutiny became too much, unraveling the progress he had fought so hard to achieve. By 1979, Billy was transferred to Lima State Hospital, a place he would later call hell on earth. The staff dismissed his diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder, branding him a paranoid schizophrenic instead. The treatment was brutal, heavy medications that fractured his mind further, and physical abuse that left him with broken ribs. Lima was a dark, suffocating abyss, a place where hope seemed impossible. For years, Billy drifted between treatment centers, caught in a cycle of progress and despair. His personalities splintered, merged, and reformed in a painful loop. But after 12 agonizing years, on August 1st, 1991, the court-ordered psychiatric monitoring finally ended. Billy Milligan was free, for the first time, truly free. Yet freedom wasn't the happy ending it seemed. By 1996, Billy resurfaced, living in California and running a small production company. He spoke publicly about plans to turn his life story into a movie, even claiming to have trained actors like Johnny Depp and Leonardo DiCaprio to portray him. But, like so much in Billy's life, these plans never materialized. On December 12, 2014, Billy's turbulent journey came to a quiet end. He passed away in an Ohio nursing home at the age of 59, leaving behind a life marked by unimaginable trauma, survival, and resilience. But his story is more than just a chapter in history. It's a lens through which we can examine the deeper truths about mental health, justice, and humanity's capacity for both harm and healing. This brings us to a fundamental truth about childhood. Parents are mirrors. Through them, children discover their sense of worth, identity, and belonging. When those mirrors are shattered by abuse and trauma, the reflection becomes distorted, fractured. Yet, with love, safety, and respect, those same mirrors can reflect something whole, filled with light and possibility. Billy seemed to understand this better than anyone. On flyers he created, he printed a simple yet powerful message: "Today, hug your children." It's an easy gesture, and maybe that's the lesson we take away from his story: the power of a single act of care. A hug, a moment of compassion, a step toward breaking cycles of pain and building something better. Thank you for exploring the minds of Billy Milligan with me. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see trauma and resilience in a new light, share it. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and never underestimate the transformative power of love.